Here's a number that should worry you a little. It takes most people 10 to 15 years to build their first £100,000, investing £200 to £500 a month. But the second 100,000 arrives in half the time, sometimes less. Today we're breaking down why the start is brutal and why it gets easier with the maths to prove it. At the start, almost all your growth comes from what you put in, not what the market gives you. Assume 7% a year, illustrative not guaranteed, capital at risk throughout. On a £5,000 balance, that's roughly £350 of growth annually. Your own contributions are doing 90% of the heavy lifting here. Somewhere around £50,000 to £80,000, something shifts. Your investment growth in a single year starts to outpace what you could realistically save in a month. That's the moment compounding stops being theory and starts paying real wages. Everyone gets there eventually, but almost nobody sees it coming because the early years feel painfully slow. Put away £200 a month at an assumed 7% return, illustrative only, capital at risk, and you're looking at roughly 18 to 20 years to reach £100,000. That sounds brutal, and honestly it is. But most of those years are spent building the base, and the final stretch moves far faster than the first. Bump contributions to £500 a month, and that same 7% assumption gets you to £100,000 in around 12 to 13 years. That's not double the speed for double the money, it's more, because bigger contributions reach the compounding crossover sooner. This is why increasing what you invest early matters more than almost anything else. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people give up somewhere between year 5 and year 8, right when the balance looks the same year after year despite consistent saving. That's not a sign it isn't working, it's a sign you're still in the contribution-heavy phase. Quitting here means never reaching the point where growth takes over. Say you invest £300 a month for 15 years at an assumed 7% return, illustrative and not guaranteed, capital at risk throughout. You'd have put in around £54,000 of your own money. Roughly half the final total came from growth you didn't have to lift a finger for. That ratio only improves from here. Once you cross the £100,000 mark, the maths flips in your favour. A 7% return on that balance, illustrative only, capital at risk, works out to around £7,000 a year, more than most people can add through saving alone in 12 months. From here, growth starts doing more work than you do, pausing contributions during a rocky market, chasing a new investment fad, or waiting for the right time to start all do the same thing. They reset your clock. Consistency beats timing every time over a 10 to 20-year horizon. The savers who reach £100,000 fastest aren't the smartest, they're simply the ones who never stopped. The slow grind to your first £100,000 isn't a sign something's wrong, it's the entry fee for everything that comes after. Every month you contribute during this phase is buying you a faster second 100,000 later. Once you understand that, the boring years get a lot easier to sit through. Whether this money sits inside a stocks and shares ISA or a pension changes the tax outcome, and both have contribution limits that shift from time to time. So always check the current figure on gov.uk. What doesn't change is the underlying maths of contributions plus time plus growth. Get the wrapper right and you keep more of what you build. So you've seen why the first £100,000 is the hardest stretch you'll ever save. In part 2, we're breaking down exactly why the second 100,000 can arrive in half the time, with the real numbers behind the acceleration. If you're still in the grind phase, stick around, because this next part is the payoff. The fastest way to shrink that 10-year wall is not smarter investing, it is bigger deposits. An extra £50 a month sounds tiny, but stacked over a decade of assumed 7% growth, it adds thousands to your final number. Before you obsess over returns, obsess over the contribution line first. That is the lever you actually control. Willpower fails, standing orders do not. Set your investing amount to leave your account the day you get paid, before you see it and before you can talk yourself out of it. People who automate consistently out save people who plan to invest whatever is left over, because there is rarely anything left over. Make the boring choice the automatic one. A 1% annual fee sounds harmless. Over decades, it can quietly eat a huge chunk of your final pot, because you lose not just that money, but everything it would have compounded into. Check the ongoing charges figure on any platform or fund before you commit. Cheap and consistent beats expensive and clever almost every time. Capital at risk, past performance is never guaranteed. If your workplace pension matches contributions, that is an instant guaranteed return before markets even get involved. Skipping it to build cash first is like turning down a pay rise. Contribute enough to get the full match, then build everything else around that. Check your scheme details and the current rules on gov.uk because they do change. Here is the number that should motivate you. If the first £100,000 took 10 years, the second one can arrive in roughly half that time, assuming similar contributions and growth. That is not magic, it is momentum. The money you already saved finally starts pulling its own weight beside you. Picture a hockey stick lying on its side. The first stretch is almost flat, painfully flat, that is years 1 to 10. Then the curve lifts and lifts again because a growing pot generates growing gains each year on top of your contributions. Nothing about your effort changes, only the shape of the outcome does. Illustrative maths at an assumed 7%, never guaranteed. £200 a month for 10 years at an assumed 7% builds a meaningful base, but it is the next 10 years that shock people. Same monthly amount, same assumed rate. Yet the ending figure can be 2 to 3 times higher, purely because the earlier money has been compounding quietly the whole time. Time in the market is doing the heavy lifting here. Capital at risk throughout. Two investors with identical contributions and identical average returns can end up with wildly different results. One panics and sells during a downturn, one simply does nothing. The one who does nothing usually wins, not because they are smarter, but because they let the maths run uninterrupted. Your behavior is a bigger variable than your fund choice. At some point, your pot will fall in value, maybe sharply, and that is normal, not a warning sign. Selling during a drop locks in the loss, staying invested gives the recovery time to happen. Nobody builds £100,000 without living through at least one uncomfortable year. Capital at risk, values can fall as well as rise. Every long-term saver hits a point where the account barely seems to move, month after month, same small number staring back. That plateau is not failure, it is the flat part of the curve right before it lifts. Quitting here is the single biggest reason people never reach the crossover point. Stay boring for one more year and the math starts pulling its weight. Whatever stage you are at, the instruction stays the same. Protect the contribution, ignore the noise, and let time do what time does. The final push towards £100,000 always feels slower than it is, right before it accelerates. You are not behind, you are early in a curve that rewards patience over intensity. The first £100,000 is hard because you are doing all the work alone with no help from compounding yet. The second one arrives faster because your money finally starts working alongside you. Stay consistent, stay invested, and let the curve do what it always eventually does. If this helped, subscribe. Clear Money UK breaks down the real maths behind British money decisions every week.